So I am Jimmy Yin, the Sensei, and I've got Chris McKee, my partner, nutritionist, and we have a special guest today, Dr. Jordan Barber, and he's coming out of not the Bronx, Brooklyn. I was about to say Bronx, but it's different. Brooklyn, New York, and we're excited to. He did something recently, had something published, so we're going to talk about it. It's actually pretty exciting news. So, Jordan, why don't you introduce yourself?
Well, I really appreciate the opportunity. It's nice to finally meet both you, Jimmy, and Chris. So a little bit about me, my passion for over 20 years has been Chinese medicine. Secondarily to that has been delivering quality healthcare by building businesses and helping other clinicians. I started in medical massage and Asian bodywork, licensed since 2004. Been in practice as an acupuncturist since '07. So that's about 16 years now, licensed New York and Florida. Recently graduated the advanced practice clinical doctorates from AOMA, Graduate School of Integrated Medicine. And I'm also adjunct faculty at the New York College of Health Professions, located in New York. I have an entrepreneurial background, so I have a portfolio of healthcare companies. I also do consulting for clinicians, and I do telemed consultings for people, mostly custom herbal medicine, lifestyle modification, specifically really focused on complex conditions. I like the nitty gritty, and I like the more complex things right now. So that's where my focus is as a clinician. My research that you mentioned was just published in Medical Acupuncture in the October edition. It's available open access, so it's not gated. So anyone can kind of just Google it and find it. It's titled Comparative Techniques of Acupuncture and Dry Needling, Intersecting with Trigger Point Physiology and Diagnostics, Cross-Discipline Narrative Review. Titles to papers are always absurdly long and are very boring to say. But that is the title. So
awesome, and we'll put that link in our feed, so you don't have to memorize that. We'll put a link so you can just click on it.
I will be honest, I have to look up my own title to remember what it was titled. It's just like creating a blog. You have to have the right keywords in the title, and I'm like, I don't know what worked. So
exactly. Well, let's talk about since you just had that published. Congratulations on getting it published.
Yes.
Kind of first give us an overview, for the lay people, like what is it about?
So I'll give you the background. One of my experimental procedures that I've been working with is actually ultrasound guided trigger point needling or acupuncture needling, what we call Asher, what other people call dry needling. And I wanted to actually do my paper on that because there's really not much out there. But then I realized there was no background information. So I wound up doing this paper to lay the background for stuff that I would like to do in the future. So the background became my focus as a massage therapist, and I got really hyper fixated on trigger point theory, right? So trigger point are hyperirritable spots that may have referral-based pain, as well as what's called autonomic phenomena, which means that they can have nervous system reactions and create these other things that aren't pain in people, yet it's still coming from the muscle. So I wanted to look at where are trigger points within both Chinese theory, and then secondarily to that, where is the act of needling these trigger points, irrespective of who's needling it? So which means I had to look at both Chinese theory or acupuncture, and I had to look at what people are calling in the West dry needling, and compare all of these three together. So it was an intersectional study or a cross-discipline study looking at these different domains in a very niche, narrow way. But ultimately, it's looking at how do we treat trigger point pain with the needle. Okay,
cool. So, Chris is kind of our lay person on our panel for regards to, Does that make sense to you? You have any questions about that?
Well, it makes sense because I've had massage therapy and working on trigger points, and and I even know where mine are. So I get it that it can also, what you said earlier, the word you used, where it should show up someplace, but it's actually coming from someplace else, right? What is that? What word was that?
No, exactly. And, one of the most things, referral patterns, trapezius, your neck muscle often is creating pain that goes up around the ear into the eye.
Right.
These types of things. We're all kind of familiar. It's like, oh, my neck is actually causing my headache. That's trigger point. That's trigger point theory.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm familiar with it from the massage therapy standpoint. And then just recently, my neck is a mess. I rode horses all my life. And when I was 40, my chiropractor said, you have a neck of a 70-year-old at 40. So I have a lot of referred pain down into my collarbone area and down in my trapezia. So I get that. And so what you're saying is dry needling is targeting certain trigger point areas. Is that what you're saying?
So we can back it up a little historical concept. Janet Travell, who was actually JFK's doctor, right? So she was pioneering the research on what is trigger point, and she was definitely inspired by acupuncture and some of the early literature. They were looking at correlations. Even a paper by Melzack, which was one of her contemporaries in 1977, found that there was a 70% correlation between trigger points and acupuncture points. And a new study by Peter Dorscher in 2022 showed 93.3% correlation between known acupuncture points and trigger points. So they're synonymous when we're talking about pain. Now, to further kind of explain that what you were asking, that question is, trigger point pain can be really any of these type of things, like releasing any sort of stiff muscles, increasing range of motion. And the dry needle aspect is what the West has been calling acupuncture. And while I don't want to get into the territory, it is simply just the application of the needle into the muscle to release the trigger point. And without getting into the physiology of what happens to it, which was a piece of my paper, it is the act of releasing the muscle directly, as opposed to what you would say ischemic compression or squeezing the muscle in a deep tissue massage. They both have different effects. Yeah.
Okay. That makes sense. Okay.
Actually, so Jordan, let's start from the surface and let's get to the physiological afterwards. So first, there's a lot of confusion, especially here in Texas and a lot of states in the US. People think there's a difference between dry needling and acupuncture, or is there a difference, or is it the same? So what did you find out?
So first, my paper was an international paper. My advisory team was both Americans and cross-discipline, including physical therapists, and as well as a good friend of mine, a medical doctor in Italy. So we stepped outside of the American context, because one of the things I found when just reviewing dry needle literature and their training material is that in the US, it is not acupuncture, because acupuncture is based on energy and mysterious things. That's not what we're doing, which is a really poor translation of understanding what acupuncture is. And that's a whole nother podcast. But in all of Europe, it's like, oh, this is just what they were doing in acupuncture. And we're aware of that because there wasn't this professional gatekeeping in Europe as much as there is here. Here, it's more about the money and who has the ability to do this procedure. So is dry needling and acupuncture the same? Yes, but it depends on who's doing it, right? Because it's how do you arrive to the choice of the point? Most acupuncturists know that we'll choose points by their local function. And we also choose points, the Link Shu Spiritual Pivot, one of the earliest texts for acupuncture, and then Sun Tzu Mao, 6th century physician, both spoke and said, the spot that hurts is the spot that you needle, whether it's a known point on the meridian or off, right? But many of the dry needle proponents in the West will say that, well, I'm needling a spot and it's not an acupuncture spot. It's not the same. So that's not true. We needle where it hurts, not the exact measurement from whatever, part of the bone or whatever we're looking for.
Yeah.
So it's really semantics, and it's a little absurd. Within a larger theory with us choosing distal points, if you go to acupuncture, sometimes we needle, the foot for the knee or something, right? However, a study, I believe by Butts in 2014, said that looking at how dry needling is being performed now, it's almost indistinguishable from acupuncture because they use distal points and they're using e-stim and they're doing all these different things. And when you read textbooks, because one of my things is I surveyed all the publicly available dry needle textbooks and training material, it's acupuncture. They're just not using our terms, which is a shame, because the problem is now it's a person that has minimal training on the use of the needle.
Yeah.
So you have a safety issue and you have an efficacy issue.
Yeah.
So what
Yeah.
you're saying is people out there doing dry needling that are not licensed acupuncturists.
Correct.
Is that
And
what you're
depending
saying?
on different states. Yeah. So a physician typically is not gatekeeped anywhere. So a medical doctor can do whatever they want. Right. And arguably a medical doctor is going to be fairly safe in what they're doing. You know, they know the anatomy. They've learned to cut and inject people and do surgical procedures. So if they're putting a needle someplace, they're aware of the depth of an organ or something like that. And then, so with them, minimal training, they could be pretty good. But when you have like a physical therapist, a chiropractor, right? People who have never been trained to incise the body in any way, shape, or form, performing techniques with as little as 24 hours or 25 hours, I think is the standard. Just from an understanding of like how to apply the needles, that doesn't make sense. I think as an acupuncturist, we spent way more just in what we call CNT, clean needle technique, which is a certification you need before you can even remotely get licensed in all the states. It's absurd, because a needle can get stuck in the body. Do you know what to do then? All these different things. So my take as an acupuncturist is that I don't believe any profession owns a modality or a procedure. I believe it's about the efficacy of the use of it. I wouldn't want someone to come to me for physical therapy because while I understand physical therapy fairly well, it's not what I do. So I don't know why someone would be going to a physical therapist to have an invasive procedure, and it's listed as a surgical procedure. The CPT code or procedural code is surgical.
Wow.
To me, it's a little absurd.
Yeah. It's crazy.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
That's interesting because I haven't seen much dry needling quote advertised. Somebody does dry needling and they do massage therapy too. I don't know that I would have wanted an unlicensed person putting a needle in me. I think I would have been like, whoa, wait a minute now.
Well, we don't want to say unlicensed. The government allows them to do this, and this is by lobbying and all these other things. And I know in Texas specifically, there's a huge, it's in the Supreme Court in Texas right now, where I believe it's the chiropractors, because they did it not by passing, they didn't pass a law where the people of the state of Texas said, yes, we'll allow chiropractors to do this. They did it by rule and regulation, which means the chiropractic board said, yeah, we can do this. And they backdoored it. And now they're being sued like, hey, you can't do that. Right. It's like just saying if the acupuncturist said, I think we're good at surgery, so we'll just add it ourselves.
Exactly.
That's a problem. Right.
So let's get into the physiological part. So what is happening actually, based on, because you said that's a lot of part of your paper. So get into the physiological explanation.
So while, again, if someone asks an acupuncturist, why does acupuncture work? Well, the most honest answer is we don't know, right? But we can give the Eastern view of what we call chi, or metabolic relationships between things. We can talk about neurological gate theories. We can talk about all these different things that we found on fMRIs, and all these weird studies. But that doesn't give you one unified answer of how it works. So when we talk about how does dry needling work, I'm going to say we don't have a unified answer. However, one of the more simpler ways is when you put a needle in. So why is a muscle tight? Let's go back to that. Muscle is tight for either there can be scar tissue due to injury, right? But ultimately, you're going to find a inability for it to soften again. And that is what's called, when we talk about a sodium-potassium theory, it's the ability of electrolytes to go in and out of the muscle, right? And tell it to contract or relax. And it's normally signaled by a cascade triggered by neurological function. But it gets stuck in there. If you go in with a needle and you irritate it, you allow fresh blood to come in, new electrolytes, new solutions, and it suddenly normalizes. It's a very simple way of explaining this sodium-potassium pump theory. It's the same thing of why massage, when you're doing squeezing of a trigger point, we all have that deep tissue. That's called ischemic compression. What we're doing is we're squeezing out and pushing out the lack of blood flow, making it have a different pressure gradient. And when we release, fresh blood runs in and hopefully normalizes the tissue again, bringing new electrolytes and everything else. Secondarily, you have an irritation that breaks what's called macrophages, an aspect that changes the tissue, right? It's a part of the immune system, comes in, breaks down tissue, and then starts the beginning of relaying new tissue. That's how you break down scar tissue. But then you also have neurological functions. Just by needling it, you have a change in interleukins, or these immune, I'm trying to think of a simple way, immune modulators and inflammatory modulators, right? So we can decrease inflammation just by changing the tissue by needling in there. So there's a whole series of different ways that it can function. But we don't have a unified theory on it. Then there's something called also the theory of basically the fascial theory, of an interconnected theory, where by releasing one area, it releases through the fascia and takes pulling or tissue tension off of the entire fascial chain. That's called the biotensegrity theory. Not as well researched, but also interesting. I think it's a little bit of all of those. You know, it depends. Why is the muscle tight? You know.
So was that fascia? Because you know, I did some fascia training, and I think Travell was one of the ones that started the fascia theory, right? The fascia model.
She was, you know, so trigger points are inherently part of the fascial system, right? And the idea is, if you look at fascia, there's no such thing as muscles. It's these muscle tissues wrapped in fascia in these giant sheaths throughout the entire body. So it's not, when we say the biceps brachii is different than the biceps brachioradialis, a separate biceps muscle. Sure, maybe in their contractility, but they're all of the same fascial sheath, right? So if there's an injury more in the neck or further down in the wrist, it's going to affect the way the biceps works, because it's pulling on the tissue that surrounds all that muscle. So Janet Travell started noticing and looking at how does this affect the fascia, but she didn't get so much, to my knowledge, within the sheath as a whole. And later on, that's expanded. You have in Harvard, since the mid-2000s, they were having the fascial symposiums and studies where people come and talk about fascia. There's a lot of weird theories that come out of fascia. So it's an area that we don't have many answers, and starts getting into the esoterics. And it gets very weird. So, yeah. But I believe fascia is practically everything. And in Chinese medicine, we have what's called the tendinal muscle, or sinew channels, which are practically identical, and to me are the fascial lines of the body. So when we see pain, we look at the fascial lines, we look at the sinew channels. It's what we've been doing forever.
Yeah. So Chris,
Yeah.
being the lay person, any questions about what he said?
No, I was just thinking it'd be really fun for people to go watch on YouTube. I think it's called the Fuzz video. I don't know if you've ever watched that. It's I think what he's a professor. He looks like he's 19 years old. I don't know what college he's at, but he's a professor, but they're doing autopsies, right? So it is not super gross. It's not super graphic, but it was the first time that I ever saw fascia. See it, right? I mean, how many of us lay people get to see it, right? We don't see autopsies.
We see it on chicken all the time, and we push it
It's
aside.
amazing. So he's really fun, and it's called the Fuzz video. And I've sent a lot of people there when we're talking about lymphatic drainage and stuff like that. But because they don't, and what was interesting was he was looking at older bodies when they get rigid and the fascia gets really rigid, and he shows how built up it was and how rigid it was. And then of course he talks about the importance of stretching, as you know, especially as you're aging, because the fascia gets so rigid. Well, to me, it was such a great visual of why should I keep moving my body and keep stretching? But when you were talking about fascia being really part of acupuncture everywhere, right? I don't think people realize that it's everywhere. And I think that would be a great video for people to go watch.
You know, it's unfortunate when you look at acupuncture in the West. It came at the same time of the transcendental movement and the early New Age movement. And the West was very excited by all that, but we didn't have a language set. So we were borrowing from, Ayurvedic language sets and whatever the Beatles were into at the time, because they were, doing acid or whatever, right? And so they were like, energy, and it's this and that, and it's stuck. And so we've always had this touch of the woo. However, if you talk to an acupuncturist, this stuff is very concrete, and we don't really have too much woo. It makes a lot of sense. It's very logical. And but one of the things that I always say is that, acupuncture is based on a philosophical philosophy of Taoism. That's the early start, right? The idea of observation of the universe and natural relationships. That's it. Not necessarily a religious thing, just observation. So if we're saying it's just observational, there can only be medicine, right? There can't be two separate medicines that conflict each other. There can't be two Taos, two separate universes. So Western medicine and Eastern have to correlate, or one of them is wrong. It might be the language set, or it might be a lack of knowledge at a certain point. But at the end of the day, the treatment of pain, which is the most established thing in acupuncture, has to match the biomechanical view that Western medicine sees. And within my paper, there's a clear correlation. There's no difference. One of the things I wanted to touch on when I think about that, and this is one of, I wish I highlighted it more in my paper, but the constraints of the paper, there's only so much you can talk about. In Chinese medicine, we say pain is related to qi and blood stasis, right? The ability for both, qi we say is more like metabolism, for things to interact in the proper way, and for blood to flow through the body and nourish all the tissues. Trigger points come in two main categories: an active trigger point, one that's creating pain right now, you feel it, and then something called latent, one that only hurts when you touch on it or you move in a certain position, pushing more pressure on it. I showed through studies of correlating this literature that active trigger points, right, the ones that are creating more pain, have what's called retrograde systolic blood flow, which means in simple terms, the blood that's supposed to be flowing through that point is going in reverse and getting backed up, more so than in the latent, which is a correlative theory, clear as day to the more poetic expression in Chinese medicine, that where there's more pain, there's more blood stasis. 100% correlation between these two things.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
And it blew my mind when I saw it, and I got so excited. I was like, but that's not my paper. It's just to find it. It may be a future paper or like a small essay, but it blew my mind. Again, going to exactly what I said, there cannot be two separate medicines. It's a language set. It's a way that we just, I like to say Chinese medicine, we use poetic language to express things, not the concrete reductionary language.
I love that.
I think we had a question. Somebody asked, does it help neuropathy?
So it can. Diabetic neuropathy, not so much, because diabetic neuropathy is a metabolic condition, right? Not so much a muscular condition. If it's neuropathy due to muscular tension, preventing signaling of the nerve, sure, the fascia binds against it. The same thing when you mentioned lymphatic drainage, fascia is so integrated and therefore trigger points, because as the fascia binds, the lymphatic ducts get compressed and the lymphatic flow gets hindered. So fascia is a big component of it. But if it's diabetic neuropathy, it wouldn't be my first go-to. It would be more normalizing the metabolic condition and controlling blood sugar.
Yeah. And that's what Jimmy and I do with our programs all the time. That's our big focus. lot of metabolic dysfunction out there.
And metabolic dysfunction leads to increase in inflammation, and that inflammation leads to increase in fascial binding. So it can, if you don't address the gut and diet, you're asking for problems.
Yeah. You can poke a lot of needles.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So let me add to that, because neuropathy is one of my specialties, and so absolutely. So this was Linda LaCroix that was asking a question. So there's different types of acupuncture, but definitely, different. We're specifically here talking about, trigger point, dry needling. Different types of acupuncture definitely can help with neuropathy, including diabetic neuropathy. But like both Jordan and Chris are saying, if you don't fix the diabetes, you ain't going to fix the neuropathy. So really it's to fixing the diabetes, which acupuncture also can help, not by itself. It's a combination of diet, exercise, as everybody already knows, but you just got to know how to do it.
Yeah.
All right, Jordan. So
when I said no,
go ahead.
When I said no to that, I meant more of just trigger point treatment and dry needling, and not so much for. Yeah. But acupuncture certainly can help neuropathy, definitely, especially electroacupuncture, and it's actually very good for it. So yeah, just to be clear, I'm very technical on things sometimes.
No, that's good. That's what I wanted to clear that up as well.
Yeah.
To make sure that people don't hear that, oh no, acupuncture can't do or can. We're talking specifically about, dry needling, trigger point acupuncture. So we've got about 5 minutes. Any last thing that you want to share about your research? That you haven't shared so far.
I think